Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Doing fantastic, man. We're here at EIC 2026. This is the second podcast we're recording after Identity Beer on Monday night. Since then, I've gone and had Vietnamese food in Germany. I love Vietnamese food. Love Germany. Obviously, I love my home country as well. But since I've been in Europe, I've been in France and Germany, and man, the food has been fantastic.
Yeah, food's good. I would say I've not had quite the culinary experiences that you have, but I only just got to Germany here on Saturday night late. Today is Wednesday. I spent most of Sunday just kind of zoned out, recovering, sleeping, and then walking the city. But yeah, we're at EIC, another great conference. You mentioned this is the second episode that we're recording here. It will go out of order though, so
okay.
Trying to think about like how we would release this, but we did do an Identity Beer, and so that'll probably come out before this. We're going to record a recap tomorrow on Thursday that I will probably combine with the Identity Beer.
Okay.
So what I'm thinking is we'll start with a recap of EIC,
Okay.
and then it'll fade into Identity Beer, conversation with Espen. And then we'll have an episode here with Thomas and coming out after that, and then an episode with Martin after that, and then another episode with another Martin.
Different Martin.
After that. And then we'll get into other things.
You just got the whole thought
That's the
process
plan.
right there.
Don't hold me to it. This is going to go out of order, so we'll see. Why don't we go ahead and get today's episode. So we are at EIC, so I want to give a shout out to really the whole company crew, but especially Marina. She's the one who hooked us up with all this stuff. Matching tables, so please comment that the tables match in this room. That was a very important point that we got to this morning. But let me go ahead and introduce our guest today. His name is Thomas Zarnhofer.
Thank you. Welcome also, Jeff and Jim. Nice to meet you here today. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's great to meet you. I'm always happy to meet new people in the identity space. I know you've spoken here probably, I think, a couple times, and you spoke here as well. We're going to get into that, but we have tradition. Whenever everyone comes on for the first time, is we like to find out about their identity origin story. So how did you get into identity? Is it something that you chose, or did it choose you?
I would say it was a little bit of both. So I started my IT career with a much broader scope, so dealing with infrastructure topics, also dealing with security topics later on. But then at some point of time, I would say when our company started to talk about really identity and access management and not about single products like Active Directory and so on, at this point of time, I have known then I would like to focus on this topic and would like to make it to my profession really, because the identity is at the center of everything in a digital world, I would say. So it secures everything, but it enables also new ways how we can deliver information to our people, how we can create processes for our company. So the identity is at the center, I would say.
Yeah, it's a great name for a podcast too.
Yeah.
You say so
We
myself.
did not pay him to say that, folks, I promise.
But we will give you a sticker. But let's talk a little bit about the talk that you gave here. What was it that drove you to say, hey, I need to share this with the world? Like, what is the genesis of that conversation?
So over the last years, we have talked with many other companies, we feel that a lot of people were struggling with migrating from legacy on-premise IGA systems to modern IGA systems. We're struggling with modernization in that area. We're struggling with really establishing governance for identities. And therefore, we also said we are now in the middle of our migration to a modern cloud-based IGA system. We want to share our pitfalls, also our tips, and also get conversations started with other companies where we can also maybe get some insights from the other companies back then. Yeah.
So this migration that you did was more than just like a technology migration. It was really an opportunity to transform the digital identity operating model. And so tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so you're completely right. It wasn't a one-on-one migration, so it was more like a real transformation, I would say. So we were facing several issues with our legacy on-premise IGA system. It was already 10 years, I think, in production. The complexity was rising over all the years. We were struggling with some of the processes. We were struggling with with updating the legacy on-prem system, so we had huge upgrade projects. And also the identity model was not the right one, I would say. So we were struggling with lifecycle processes because we were not managing identities based on human persons. We were managing them based on work contracts. And I would say all of these things led us then to starting this initiative to modernize in that area.
Yeah, when I think about identity from 10 years ago, it was a different approach. Identity management was more about control in the center, then push it out. Identity governance is more about, having visibility, one place to go to know who has access to what, and then automate on top of that. So you have kind of this perfect sweet spot. I'm wondering, was there a specific tipping point, or what was it that kind of drove you guys to say, out with the old and with the new?
I would say it wasn't one tipping point. It was more the whole sum of complexity, which was rising with the old system and the identity model we had before. We also had master data problems. We had the complexity around upgrades of the on-premise system. So we had to plan huge upgrade projects for major version upgrades every 2 or 3 years at least. Mm-hmm. So they were, the main problem was there also, it was taking a lot of resources in our team. We couldn't concentrate on how we really innovate and really govern identities. We were just doing operations of the system, I would say, yeah.
So one of the themes in your presentation is around this idea of contact-based versus person-based from a modeling perspective. So for people who aren't familiar with, what does that mean? Like, what is contact-based versus person-based? Let's start there, and then we'll go further.
So you are mentioning the right thing. The identity model was a major topic for us in our transformation. Contract-based means we created one identity per work contract in the past. So if a person maybe had 2 parallel work contracts in 2 stores, or one post work contract and a temporary work contract in parallel, or if a person was starting a second time to work, then they got a second identity. Then a second account was provisioned also on our identity providers. That was a security issue, of course, also. Also, we got often accounts and fragmented identities in that area. We didn't have a real mover process in place. If somebody got a new work contract, it was a leaver and a joiner for us. So that was a big issue, and therefore we said we completely redesigned the identity model. And when switching to a modern IGA product, that was the ideal point where we could do that, because in an existing product, it's hard to change the model, how identities are reconciled from the source systems there, and how you work with them, and how do you define the lifecycle events and govern them.
It's a real problem when we're dealing with IGA implementations, is how important that data is coming from your identity sources of truth. Right. You've got your employees, you've got contractors, you've got vendors, business partners, et cetera. What that usually leads to, at least what I found, is you might have multiple sources of truth. So my employees might be in this system, or in the case of a retail environment, a store or a retail unit might have its own identity source, and then another store or another retail unit might have a different source. How do you tackle that idea of saying, okay, do we leave them separated and then try to bring them all up into the IGA platform? Do you try to create a centralized view of all identities? What is the approach there that you think works best?
So we took the approach that we create a centralized view on them. So we said we want to have one source system. So we are consolidating now all the master data from different HR systems and different sources in one authoritative source for our IGA system, and say this is the truth for us. We clearly defined which attributes are coming from the source system, because in the past that was also not clear. Some attributes were maintained in the old IGA system, some were maintained in Active Directory and other systems, and some of the attributes were coming from the HR source. So that was also a big issue, and we have some different HR systems over our countries, and that was a huge issue for us.
So the idea of your IGA platform, is the IGA platform the center of truth then for all the identities, or is there a separate intermediate system that is sort of like your master data lake or whatever that looks like?
The master data is coming from one central HR system now, where we consolidate all the different HR sources. But I would say for the identities itself, then the real source of truth is then really our new IGA system. And there we clearly define which attributes are authoritative in which, coming from which system, and the identity is authoritative there, and we don't take other sources anymore. Yeah.
I feel like in your presentation you really emphasize this point about like bad data can kill the project, right? And so I want to know, what are some specific examples, if you would, of where that kind of problem surfaces? Is the data coming from the old IGA or the old identity system? And then, any kind of tips that you can give, because I think a lot of people listen to the podcast and practitioners like you who've kind of got the war stories of, hey, try to avoid this or that.
I was already mentioning one thing, so clearly define which attributes are authoritative where, because in the past it was the case that, for example, it was possible that somebody said, I have a very complex name or multiple first names, and I just want to have the first one of my names in all the systems where it shows up, like mail system and so on. But in the HR system, the long name with multiple first names and so on was in there. But our service desk was maintaining the changes only in Active Directory. When we now started to migrate to a new system, we would have, let's say, overwritten all the data on our identity provider with wrong values. So we had to do a real analysis of all the data between identity provider, IGA system, and the source system where the HR master data is coming from. So that we did that for several attributes. So also department names were not consistently synchronized. Names were such a topic. So we had several topics there where we had to do cleanups and introduce new concepts.
So you're highlighting sort of this orchestration and this coordination and this partnership that you have to have with HR. Because I think what I've found, and I'm curious if you find this as well, is HR teams really want to own their data. It's their data, and you're just allowed maybe to use it. And I think one of the things that I see come up quite a bit is the struggle between an IAM team who is trying to do their best effort to say, hey, why don't we work on things like automated onboarding and offboarding and joiner, mover, leaver and changes, right, all that stuff. But sometimes they run into a challenge with an HR team maybe that doesn't understand what that integration looks like, and they think it's maybe more work than it really is, and connectors, right, and all this other stuff. I want to boil down the question to, what have you found to be successful to partner with data sources out there, whether it's HR or maybe a finance team?
I would say really describe them, what is the purpose, how we use this data, and how we generate value for the whole company with it, so that they see what they maintain in their systems has an effect on the whole digital ecosystem of our company, I would say. Because in the past they were saying, we are doing payroll. That is what HR told us some years ago. It's a payroll system. We need the data for doing the payroll, and everything else is not interesting for us. But we could change that situation. It was several discussions and longer meetings and workshops, but then we came really to the conclusion. We showed them, look, we want to build up automations, we want to create really automated lifecycle processes for new joiners in our company. We need the correct data there, and we need several attributes to really define how our processes work. And after we showed it to them in detail, they also supported us then. So just go into the conversation, I would say. Don't be shy.
It's great that you also had your HR partners willing to adapt their processes if it made sense for the business as a whole. Sometimes I think I ran into this earlier in my career where there'd be some resistance, like it's the payroll system, right. Period, end of sentence. But I think you're describing the ideal situation where folks are willing to adapt processes. I was actually wondering a little bit, you're talking about all this data work that you're doing, and here was a question from one practitioner to another is, what tool did you use to do this analysis? Because now we have AI, you could plug a bunch of data into AI. My concern would be that, if it didn't come out perfectly, right? This is data you really can't make mistakes with, or you could go the old fashioned of Excel.
And do you really want to put all of your personnel data into an AI?
That's a good point.
That was also really a concern for us. So we took the old-fashioned way, really. So we did a lot of Excel work and doing several exports from the system and comparing the data, matching the data, and analyzing in Excel all the differences between the systems then.
So Jeff and I do consulting work together, and we often are building roadmaps. And usually in the roadmap, or a lot of times in the roadmap, there's this IGA project. And I tend to like to put a project right before it called data cleanup. Part of my reasoning is for sure you're going to have data problems if you don't clean it out. But also companies usually have to go through the process of getting approval to buy the software, procure the software, et cetera. So they have time, they can be working on data cleanup. At the same time, the argument can be made, an IGA system has the tools to clean up the data for you. What do you recommend? What did you do?
I would recommend to start before really going into the IGA implementation. Because often the IGA tool vendors tell you, we have the tools to clean that up, but I think it's better to really concentrate on your data before, then set up your identity model, how you want it, define which attributes, which data is coming also from which systems, and then start really with the tool, but not the other way around.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the way that transformation process works. In your conversation, you broke this out into 3 different phases. You had foundation, migration, and what was the third one? Adoption. Look at my notes. Let's talk about that phasing, because phasing helps us as humans digest what is it we have to do, right? I can't just say, hey, Thomas, go implement IGA. Well, okay. There's so many things to go through that. And to your point, Jim, right? We've got roadmaps to say, okay, here's the order of operations. Let's talk a little bit about those phases. Why is that so important? Or is it purely just it's a human thing to help us understand it better?
On the one hand, you're right. It's also a human thing to help us to structure the things a little bit. But I would say it helped us also to describe to the management and to other people that we really need a foundation phase where we talk about the identity model, where we talk about the data consolidation from HR sources and that stuff, and really do the base setup of the new IGA platform itself then. And then we go into the real migration, where we then can switch over different governance processes and target systems from the old system to the new one. And then finalize everything with an adoption phase, how we called it, where we then really can shut down the old system and optimize also the stuff in the new system, because we said we don't want to do a one-on-one migration. We also want to introduce some new governance processes. We want to introduce some new things in there. We want to take the value we can get out of the new product, of course. And so in that case, we said also there will be an adoption phase, of course, where we'll then really optimize the new system.
Let me follow up on that adoption phase, because you're in the middle of this process, right, of migrating from an on-prem to a new solution in the cloud. How do you incent people to say, oh, I should do this work, I should take advantage of that? And how do you improve adoption? Because I think a lot of people struggle with, hey, we built this thing, we sure hope people use it.
Yeah, I would say it's also a lot of conversation again, and doing lobbying in the application teams, also telling them, we have a new system where we can also now put a better governance over the permissions in your applications. We need to adopt it. We need to switch over the applications. We need your support, and do that early, because normally the application teams deal with other stuff. They want to deliver new features for the business in their applications and not support you in migrating the identity management stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So one of the challenges of migration is you've got potentially two different systems running almost in parallel, almost at the same time. You've got cutovers between one system doing automated deprovisioning, and then you flip a button and all of a sudden the new one is. What are some of the concerns or things that maybe help improve risk from an operational standpoint to have both of these things running either in parallel or very close to parallel?
So for us, this was a measure of having both systems in parallel operation. Was a clear measure to reduce the risk in the overall migration, because doing a big bang in the identity field, I think, is not a good thing, because you can put a lot of harm to the organization also if you switch over all SAP targets, for example, from an old IGA system to the new one on the same day in the same minute, and then maybe nobody has access to all the SAP systems out there. That would be a mess, of course. And there we say we take that phased migration approach also, where we take one system, target system after the other, and also take one process after the other. Of course, it's important to clearly specify which system is responsible at the moment for which target systems and processes. That is, I would say, the success factor for having that, defining a clear responsibility. But if you have the clear responsibility definition, have a clear plan when you switch over which systems and processes to the new IGA tool, then you will be successful, I would say, yeah.
You talk about one-on-one migration, which is what you wanted to avoid, right? It reminded me of the what we call lift and shift, right? In the cloud, like, you could just take this server and run it as a virtual server in the cloud, or you could do it cloud right. You could kind of prepare for the way to manage cloud, not just be dependent on individual servers. At the same time, all of that is theoretically great, but it takes maybe just lift and shift some things and do some things right is the right balance. So bringing it back to your topic, did you find that you had to find some areas where you do just lift and shift, and other areas where you said, hey, there's the opportunity to get the process right?
We really said challenge everything during the migration, because we said we don't want to do assumptions. We really said we challenge everything, starting from the connector side to target systems, but also processes. For example, the mover process, we completely restructured the mover process now when switching to the new tool, because we said maybe it was not the ideal process for our organization, which was implemented in the old tool in the past. And now we really said how really looks the best process, which we can also handle with the new tool, because not all tools handle all the processes in the same way. And if we would have taken just the process definition, how it was in the past in our organization, and tried to implement it with the new tool, I think we would have failed.
Yeah. I've seen some implementations where, when you're working things out on how you want them to work or how you've done it in the past, let's just say somebody new joins, they get an email address provisioned, and they have the same name as somebody. So now what is your process for naming the new email address? If you come up with, hey, we want it to work the way we've always done it, that may require some customization or hard work in implementing your new tool. But maybe the new tool has a way and you say, we'll just do it that way. Did you run into any scenarios like that? I call that best practices. I don't know that it means it's better than any other practice. It just means that's the way the tool is built. And if you use that, it's going to be best from the least implementation work.
I think we were running into such things, but I don't have the one big case, I would say, here. So email addresses maybe is not the case. We set the email system in our case as authoritative system to generate the email address, and we reconcile it back to IGA then. So in that case, we are lucky. But for other connectors, for example, when connecting some of our business applications, we said the old connector was completely wrong architecture, I would say, and we completely redesigned it then.
Another example I can think of would be getting somebody their password and their username the first time, but maybe some of those things work through your Microsoft system, but you had to provision that account. Anyway, you might need to change the process and coming up with something totally custom versus working how the product works is kind of the example.
So we are also trying, for example, some things were provisioned via some PowerShell scripts in the past, but now we also tried what we can do out of the box with the new IGA tool. We don't start PowerShell scripts anymore. We do it directly out of IGA to provision these attributes, to add these entitlements, not do some things over IGA and some things via PowerShell scripts. So all that were such things, as you mentioned.
What a novel idea. You're using your IGA platform to do IGA things.
Right.
I'm curious if anything surprised you when you were going through this process of transforming from on-prem to cloud. Like we've asked a bunch of questions, but like what's something, and maybe nothing did, but was there something that surprised you as you're going through this process that you're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that before and we need to adjust for that?
Let me think.
I know, I'm putting you on the spot here, so give you think about it. But I find that like this is something that, look, you can have as many plans as you want, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I hadn't accounted for that. And I think a lot of people listening are probably like, we had this thing happen, right? They're probably like in the comments or in their mind thinking about the things. But I'm curious, like when you were going through that process, like, did anything surprise you?
So I think a new thing for us was how to deal with cloud products, how the updates work there, for example. Yeah. So, because don't think that there are no testing processes and that you don't have to do testing when the cloud provider does an update in the IGA platform itself. Of course, you still have to establish testing so that you really know that all your processes and all your implementations and connectors still work after the cloud provider of the IGA tool does a major upgrade, for example, of the platform in the cloud. That was also a new thing for us where we had to learn how to deal with that. Because at our on-premise system, we completely had that process in our hands. We could plan when do we do the upgrade, when do we integrate the patch into the system, and we could really then coordinate all that with the testing. But with the cloud itself, the testing gets more important. But of course, you don't have to deal with so much operations effort anymore as with the on-premise system, but don't think that it is completely zero then.
Yeah, you mentioned that you took the approach of challenge everything, and I think that's one of the areas to challenge is like, hey, you have all these environments, maybe with on-prem software, like, hey, we have a development environment, an integration environment, a test environment, pre-production environment, and production. And now in your new cloud, it might just be sandbox and production.
Of course, that is also a situation we had to deal with. So before we had more stages, but we also had to learn how to deal with that situation now in the cloud and how that works. And also, one crucial thing for us was also we want to automate the deployments now between the stages in the cloud. That is also an important thing for us.
Well, we've made it about 30 minutes. I don't think we mentioned AI really at all, but it is the year 2026, so we have to talk AI. How do you see AI impacting specifically the IGA space itself? I'm curious where you think this is headed.
Of course, there are a lot of discussions going on how AI influences IGA. On the one hand, you have the AI identities itself we have to manage in the future. So that is also a topic on our roadmap, of course. We're not doing it at the moment, but of course we want to also govern the AI identities in the future. We need to. We had a lot of conversations also during the conference already regarding AI. But I think AI can also bring a lot of benefits in the existing IGA world, not only dealing with the AI identities or non-human identities itself. It can also bring big improvements for the existing processes, like role requests, like access decisions, recommendations, all that stuff. So a lot of manual processes at the moment there. And of course, I think AI can also revolutionize this area. So I would love to see that AI makes IGA predictive, I would say. So in my ideal world scenario, in the future, the IGA system should know what a new employee needs in terms of authorization, in terms of roles, and maybe just then provide already, based on some job description, a predefined set of roles. Just ask the new manager of the person, is that okay for you? If not, tell me, otherwise I will provision this new roles for your new employee, that he has everything he needs to start the work on 1st of June, for example. Yeah. So that would be the ideal scenario from my perspective. We are not there at the moment, so we are dealing a lot with how, maybe bring natural language processing, where we can chat with some chatbot, and the chatbot answers which roles do you need, and can request the roles on behalf. But I really want to see in the future this prediction already. That is, I think, then the big revolution.
Let me ask you about that chatbot idea, because when I first started working on this a while back, actually we kind of started the podcast about 7 years ago, one of the things that was kind of hot at the time was the idea of a chat interface. Now, at the time, it wasn't generative AI, it was really a multiple choice question, right? But hey, let's put this into Slack or Teams or whatever Microsoft Messenger was around. It might have been free Teams. Do you think, though, that the business would actually use that? Because I find it somewhat challenging to say, okay, do I really want to ask a manager to go to a chatbot and tell it what I need access to? I don't know if the business value really is there for the adoption.
I think it depends on the business person who is dealing with the access. Of course, maybe the younger generation is already used to chat with ChatGPT and Claude and all the other AI tools. Maybe some older generation people also already starting with that, but it depends, and I think we have to provide this possibility at least. But at least for the next years, there will be several ways how to request roles, for example, I think, yeah.
I think one thing that has a lot of potential with AI would be just the language prompt where you could type in a question like, hey, I need access to open a purchase order or something like that, and it would figure out what role you need and say, hey, this is the role you need. Would you like to have me automatically set up a request for you to get access? And now I can kick off the request rather than the old-fashioned way of trying to figure out how to do it, searching in a web page.
Right. So I think that is also a problem for a lot of business people in our company, how to find the right roles they need for their work. That is a big issue in our company also. We are providing more and more roles for our business applications now, so setting up proper role models everywhere where we have critical access. But the flood of roles, I would say, is also then a huge challenge for our people in the business, because they are often not knowing what do I really need then to do my job. And I think if they see the benefit of such a chatbot, if you provide them a chatbot which they can just ask, the chatbot, for example, sees they are working in a headquarter in Salzburg, and therefore for the finance roles, they maybe need this set of roles because they work in the headquarters. Somebody else in some other location maybe needs a different role because of the organizational assignment.
Essentially, it uses inference to figure it out.
Right.
But do you trust the thing figuring it out? And do you want to expose your roles to the business? Do you want to make things discoverable to say, oh, I didn't even know that access existed. Sure, let me ask for it.
Not everything, I would say. Yeah.
You need to really appropriately scope
Yeah.
sort of what a person
So
can
we
request
call
this.
it business roles. Business roles are really the roles which are exposed to our business. But of course, we also assign technical access, which the business maybe doesn't see, and do automatic access assignment, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's end on a lighter note. I want to get you out there so you can enjoy the rest of the conference. Let's talk a little bit about what you do for fun when you're outside of conquering the IGA world.
So I would clearly say nothing with computers. Yeah. So
You completely unplug. You were mentioning you like to travel, you
Yeah.
like to climb mountains,
Right.
different types of mountains, not
So-
IGA mountains.
not IGA mountains, so the real mountains. So I'm living in Salzburg, a nice city in Austria. So mountains all around our city, and yeah, going hiking a little bit, relaxing in the mountains, but also traveling a lot, doing city trips. That is what I really like in my free time. Yeah.
What's your favorite place that you've visited so far in the world?
Hard question. So I would say there is not this favorite place. In summer, for example, I like to be somewhere where it is warm, like Croatia in Europe is a nice destination to really relax some days at the sea. But also doing almost every year I'm doing also a city trip for a weekend to London, for example, because I like the city very much. So I would not like to really live in such a big city, but to just visit London for a weekend is nice every year. Yeah.
What about you?
I mean, I'm going to Italy next week. I'm so excited about it. And everybody in Germany keeps telling me, oh, Italy, you're going to love it. It's the best food, and everything is great.
It's a nice destination, of course, in Europe. Yeah. So Italy, after Croatia, I would say also love Italy for doing a trip in summer. Also relaxing at the sea. Also they have nice old cities which you can visit. Yeah.
What do you look for on a vacation? Is it when you say you unplug, right? Do you look for nature? Do you look for history? Do you go for culinary? Like, oh, I want to go enjoy the food and drink of an area?
I would say a mix of everything, yeah. So of course having good food there. So both in Italy and Croatia you can have good food, but also like to visit cities and see new things, and also but also see the nature. So really a mix of everything, yeah.
All right, my last question for you, and this is really more specific to Austria, so I've never been. What is something that I should do or consider before I visit Austria for the first time? Someplace I should go, something I should try, like I don't want to call it a hidden gem because this will go out to a bunch of people and it might no longer be a hidden gem, but like what's something that, hey, you really need to go do this or try this?
Of course, I would say you have to try to eat Wiener Schnitzel. It's one of the classic dishes in Austria. But you also have to look on all the nature and mountains. You have to at least go hiking to one of the mountains and also visit one of the lakes in Austria, because we also have very beautiful lakes that are the hidden.
Sign me up
things.
for all three.
Yeah.
I will definitely enjoy the food. I would definitely sit by the lake. I would probably partake in some of the mountain climbing. I would walk up a hill.
So what's your ideal vacation, Jeff?
It varies quite a bit. So I like to not have plans on vacation. My day and my weeks are very structured already between the day job in consulting, the night job with podcast. And so when I go on vacation, I kind of like to not have a plan. So just kind of wander. I got here early before the IC conference, so Sunday. I basically just walked all over Berlin downtown, from everywhere from TV Tower, which is kind of where we're at, Alexanderplatz, all the way down to really kind of Berlin station, sort of, that area.
That's a good plan.
Yeah, like
To
I
have
just
no
wanna,
plan.
Yeah, it's for me. It's not about unplugging. It's just I'm just gonna wander and roam and just see and
also
absorb it.
when I visit a new city, sometimes I also do it in the same way. So not make big plans before. When I arrive in the city, maybe look what are some important places you have to visit, and then really walk through the city and discover on your own also a little bit. Yeah.
I think it helps that having come here now for the second time. So last year we came for EIC for the first time. So this is my second trip. So I was somewhat familiar with, okay, here's kind of how it works. And shout out to my RSM friends from Germany. They kind of taught me how the train system works. I was very carefully observing them last year. Like, okay, we take advantage of it. So I've taken the train a couple times here and I've kind of gone back and forth. So it helps having, I guess, just an initial familiarity with it. But I was kind of bummed because there was a bakery that was underneath the Alexanderplatz station that I really liked. And it's under construction right now. And so none of those things are there. So like, oh man, now what am I going to do? Like try to find something else to eat, but I'll live.
And try not to fall into the American habit of go to Five Guys or something. You can have Five Guys at home. Did you eat there?
I did have Five Guys. Saturday night when I landed, I just wanted something quick and simple before I crashed.
Yeah.
And it was, honestly, it was the best Five Guys I've ever had. It was a fantastic.
I went there last year and it was a fantastic Five Guys. But
you know what, after, I guess at that point it had been like almost 16 or 20 hours of travel between like when I left the house, the flights, you know, the waiting in between and going through customs, all that stuff. It was about 20 hours for me, and I just wanted a bacon cheeseburger.
Yeah, no, comfort food means it makes you comfortable. It's what you're used to, and yeah, I can see why you did that.
Yeah, but I've been exploring since then. I've been getting other types of food. I'm sure I'll get other things tonight and tomorrow or whatever, but yeah, Thomas, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure to join you today in the session, and nice to meet you and nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and edit it for this episode. Again, shout out to EIC for hosting us and giving us a spot to record, which is very cool. Shout out to Marina again. You can find us on the web, idacpodcast.com. Like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. That's how we get to do cool things like this and bring it to you. We'll leave it there for this week. Thank you, everyone, for watching and or listening. Very easy for me to say. And we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.